Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Nebraska Way. Today, we have a great guest. He is the governor of the great state of Iowa, Kim Reynolds. Kind of ironic, this is the Nebraska Way, and we're going to have the governor of Iowa on today. But Kim has a great long record of public service. Grew up in Madison County, and then graduated from Interstate 35 Community Schools in 1977. Married her husband, Kevin, in 1982, and was a 4-term elected official for the Clark County Treasurer. Then got elected to the Iowa State Senate, and then became lieutenant governor for Governor Terry Branstad, served almost 2 terms there, and then became the first woman elected to the highest elected state seat in Iowa, becoming governor of Iowa on her own. And then also, while you were doing that, you got your bachelor's from Iowa State in 2016 as well.
Yep.
So you've got 3 daughters and 11 grandchildren, all of whom live in Iowa. So you're very blessed by that.
Yay. Yep.
So just like I said, a great long career in public service in Iowa. And I know we got a number of issues we want to talk about, but let's just start, Kim. Just kind of walk us through, how did you grow up and why did you decide to get involved in public service, and how did that career lead you to the governor's office?
Okay. Well, thanks, Pete, first for giving me the opportunity to sit down and just have a conversation with you. I appreciate it very much. And I certainly appreciate our neighbor to the west. Iowa and Nebraska, very well aligned. Ag is a big part of our state's economy. And so I've enjoyed the opportunity to work with you over the years as the governor of the state of Iowa. So, I grew up in a very small rural Iowa town. My dad was farmed and worked at John Deere both. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so I said she kept everything moving and operating and working. Even though Dad farmed and worked in a small town, you get to be involved in everything. And I said I didn't know, but that was probably one of the best things that I did to prepare me for what I do today, because I love being involved in things as sports and school activities and band and just you name it, I participated in it. And even with everything that we had going on, I don't remember my folks missing anything. So Dad was the Little League coach. We were all very involved in our community. We helped our neighbors if there was a farm crisis or if they needed help. And so, that's just kind of the church, going into my grandpa's every Sunday for dinner or after church. Family was a big part of my life. Community was a big part of my life, and really being involved. And so I've kind of carried that throughout my life as well, and hopefully instilled those same values in our children. And now we're seeing that play out with our grandchildren, which is just amazing because they all are local, and many of them live in rural Iowa as well. Kind of a funny story that I got into politics. I started in the private sector. I worked for a small pharmacy, and customer service and going that extra step and really working with them was how we were able to compete with some of the larger chains. And so then we moved to Osceola, and I started working in the treasurer's office. Never thought about going into politics. Wasn't that involved? I voted, but not involved in the political scene at all. And so I just noticed there were some things that I thought we could do differently. Customer service, there wasn't any technology. It just was a completely different atmosphere. And so like any good wife, night after night or week after week, I would share all of my ideas that I had for making that office run better and just really serving customers better with my husband, Kevin. And after 4 years of working in the treasurer's office in the driver's license area, the current treasurer decided not to run. And again, nobody was going to run for that office. I said to Kevin, never thought about it. And so he just really politely at dinner one night said, look, Kim, this is how I see it. Either you run for office and implement all those wonderful ideas that you've been sharing with me over the last 4 years, or I pretty much don't want to hear another thing about it. And it was just, I think, that nudge and that challenge that I needed. And I did. I door knocked the entire county. I went out to rural Iowa, and I won against somebody that had lived there his entire life. And I implemented a lot of the things I talked about, and it was very fulfilling. And so from there, I went to the state Senate.
So actually, let me stop you there for a second, though. So winning that race, what you did is you basically outworked your opponent, right?
I outworked the
knocking
opponent.
on all those doors and everything like that, right?
Yep. Yep, I had people tell me they hadn't seen an elected official in years, but I wanted to get out there and personally introduce myself, talk about some of the things that I thought we could do different, like working a full day and not shutting down 45 minutes early to balance out, just little things like that. And so I often say I went from representing one county, then I had the opportunity to run for the state Senate. And again, I was very involved in the Treasurers Association, loved being part of leadership and just driving new ideas and stuff. But I think as a good leader, you need to step out and encourage new people to run, to grow that bench. And I bet you'll identify with this. I didn't do idle very well. And so at that time, they came and asked if I would run for the Senate. And I was like, no, okay. And then Governor Branstad asked me to run as his lieutenant governor. I had worked with him on driver's license to expand it to the county treasurer's office. And then he got appointed ambassador. I stepped in as governor and then ran and was elected.
So what kind of issues did you work on as a state senator?
So rural Iowa has always been, a passion of mine. Same things, just bringing economic growth to rural Iowa, making sure that they had a strong voice in the legislature. I was in the minority. It's complete opposite to where we're at today. So it was 32 to 18, but I was part of the 18. So what I did is I took that opportunity and I met with every one of the directors of the various agencies to introduce myself, to talk about issues in Southern Iowa, to make sure that we had some sort of a relationship. So if I did have an issue, I would already have, made the connection, had a relationship. I could talk to them about what we were dealing with in Southwest Iowa, and to talk about their budget and how it was put together. And when Governor Branstad brought me on to run, he said, I think my lieutenant governor candidate knows more about the budget than the current governor who we were running against, who had not implemented or talked to the various agencies across the state. So, and I didn't know, Pete, that I would be tapped to be the lieutenant governor, but I really did have a good sense of what the agencies were, what they were doing, what their budget was, and just different areas that I could really plug into and then work on.
Cool. And so how did you make that jump? I mean, you were a state senator, and obviously you were very well informed. And I assume, again, to win those races, you basically outworked your opponent, knocking doors and doing all the right things to win those races, right?
Yeah, in fact, I applied that same strategy, but it's a very rural district. It was the largest geographical district in the state of Iowa. So I went from representing one county to 7. So I started out with that same mindset. I was going to knock every community, every town. I was going to go into rural Iowa. And Kevin said, we're not going to get through, the first county if we practice, if we do what we're doing. So I went to a lot of Farm Bureau meetings. I door knocked every community, every town, but really tried to do the outreach with rural Iowa through Farm Bureau meetings and things of that nature. But I started in January, so I started door knocking for the primary. I did have a primary. I was successful in that primary. But I started door knocking then with gloves and mittens in freezing cold weather. And I'd actually, by the time we got to the general, I was on my 3rd time through the district, reaching out to voters and just, again, talking about things that I thought, would be important to them and how I could be a voice for them in the state capitol, really representing economic growth and prosperity for all of Iowa and not just our more urban areas.
Yeah, there's no substitute for elbow grease there, is there?
No.
Yeah. No. All right, so now you're in the state Senate and you're getting to know the agencies, and like you said, it's what did you say it was 38-18?
32 to 18.
32-18.
Not good.
Yeah, you're in the minority there. But you're like, hey, let me get educated about all this stuff. How did you come to the attention of Terry Branstad?
Well, when I was county treasurer, we had in rural Iowa, so again, this was a rural Iowa issue, the driver's license, state DOT teams would come out to the counties one day a week to issue driver's license. Right. So kids would have to take off, take off half a day. You'd have to take off work. And so we made the argument to then Governor Branstad, after they were talking about regionalizing local government, we made the argument that we actually are in a better place, especially in rural Iowa, to take on some of the state functions. We could do it more efficient, more effective, and at a lower cost. And we were able to prove that out. And so we went from them just being in our different counties one day a week to offering the service out of the county treasurer's office 5 days a week from 8 o'clock until 4:30. And we started with a pilot. We talked him into, and he had just issued a Fisher Commission that was going just the opposite direction. But I was part of a group that went up and sat down with him. So I really appreciated Governor Branstad because of this. Even though he had made a commitment and did a study and was heading in a different direction, he listened. Our counter proposal was compelling enough that he let us do a pilot program, and we were able to demonstrate in the 6 counties that we could do it more efficient, more effective, and at less cost. And so we went from a 6-county pilot to today we have 88 counties that are issuing driver's license out of the treasurer's office. And again, it brings economic development because people travel to our counties. You can get them done anywhere, but it's quicker sometimes to come down to one of the connecting counties than it is to do it in the more populous areas and counties. And so it was a great opportunity. We did CDL, we did driver's license, all of that from the county treasurer's office. That, and I had served on the IBRS board. He had nominated me as the county treasurer to be that representative on our pension.
Okay, so Governor Branstad kind of knew you through this work that you'd done on the driver's licenses, and basically it's creating a win-win for everybody here, right?
For everybody, yep.
And so then he asked you to be his lieutenant governor when he was running. What was that like?
Well, I think when they first asked if I would, now this is a true story. We laugh today when we tell it, but when he first asked if I would be his running mate, he didn't. They brought a team that was interviewing different people, and we had some common friends in Clark County, and so the individual that was doing the interviewing said, "We'd like to bring you in. We're considering you for the lieutenant governor." And I said, "Oh, well, that's really nice, but I'm sure it's Kimball's that have said that, they would like the governor to interview me, and I appreciate him considering, but that's okay." I mean, really, because I just did not see this happening. And so turns out you interview really well when you think it's like not the real thing. And so David said, "No, we really do. Kim wants you to come in and interview for the position." So we did, and just talked about things I'd worked on, and we really aligned philosophically very, very well. He was from rural Iowa, such a hard worker, really a great, I couldn't have asked for a better mentor, honestly, than to have the opportunity to serve with Governor Branstad. But Pete, when they called me back for a second interview, I thought, holy cow, this is getting serious. What's going on here?
So did you get nervous in the second interview?
Maybe a little bit more, it was a little more intense. But I was just still myself because I just still thought, oh, long shot. And I was actually participating in a heart walk at the state capitol with my girls and a couple of one grandchild, when I got the call, and he said that I'd made my choice, and I would like you to be my running mate as lieutenant governor. And I was just speechless, but said, of course, I would be so honored to have the opportunity to do that. And we were facing about a $900 million deficit when we were lucky enough to win that election, because similar to where we're at right now, the previous administration had used one-time money for ongoing expenses, and we were looking at about a $560 million shortfall in Medicaid. Medicaid. And it was so impressive when we won to sit down and start putting the budget together, to realize at that point how lucky Iowa was to have somebody with Governor Branstad's experience that had come back to turn the state around again and get it back in good financial standings. And we did it within a year. We were able to take that almost $1 billion deficit and turn it into a surplus. So it was really a great that was a really great opportunity for me to sit down and just watch him kick into action and see what needs to be done in those kind of circumstances.
Yeah, and so again, for our listeners and viewers who may not be familiar with Iowa, maybe they are, governor as Nebraska, Terry Branstad, longest serving not only governor in Iowa history, but in U.S. history.
Yeah.
And actually was governor for a long time, took a break, and then came back, again, what we're talking about now, to get back involved, and then ultimately was appointed ambassador to China, which is when you took over as the governor and then got elected as well on your own. Yep. But one of the other things, too, I think is really cool about your bio is you got that community college degree.
Yeah.
And then you went back to Iowa State and you got your bachelor's in 2016. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that aspect of, getting that advanced degree while you're a lieutenant governor.
Yeah. Well, I don't like starting something and not finishing it. And Kevin, my husband, when you hear me say Kevin, that's my husband. I'm very blessed. He's a saint and just a great dad, great husband.
I know
But he
Kevin
would
too, and
always,
so I'll vouch for that.
yes, he is
He's a
great.
guy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it makes all the difference in the world. And he'd always say, "Well, Kim, I think you're doing okay." And I said, "Why is it the people that always have the degree tell the people that don't that it's okay, not it's not that big a deal?" But I had utilized, so I kept working on it. I was working. We had a family. I would start. I would stop. I would kind of go back. So I was able to get most of my associate's degree at various community colleges. Then I started at Upper Iowa University because they had 8-week blocks and they were longer classes. And I was lieutenant governor. I was a grandma. I was 57 at the time, and so had a lot going on. And I was able to leave work at 5 o'clock, drive to Upper Iowa University, and the classes would run from 5:30 until 10 o'clock, but they were 8-week blocks. And so I was able to really move things along, trying to get my degree and be finished. I have a husband who is an Iowa State alum. All 3 of our daughters are Iowa State alums. All 3 of our son-in-laws are Iowa State alums. And so kind of wanted to be an Iowa State alum. And so we connected with them to see how I could work that with my schedule, as lieutenant governor. And so I was able to do a chunk of the classes online. And so I would, again, just come back to work in the evening and just work in my office here at the Capitol because it was quiet, and was able to complete my bachelor's degree in marketing, business and communication and marketing. It was kind of I don't know, whatever that was, but I tell you, it was just such an incredible feeling to finally get that accomplished. And the amazing thing was, out of that graduation ceremony, I happened to be sitting next to a single mom who wasn't my age, but older student, and had kids working criminal justice. And we were just hugging, and the chances of the 2 of us sitting together by each other and to hear her story about what she was able to do to get there. She said, "I don't think these young kids have any idea, what a big deal this is, but this truly is a big deal." And I actually told her story at my condition of the state. And I said, the reason I know that is because I had the opportunity to sit next to her as lieutenant governor, 57-year-old grandma, getting my bachelor's degree too. And we've just remained really good friends, and she's doing great. She did say to me, "Are you going to go back and get your master's?" And I said, "No, I'm done. I'm happy. I finished what I started."
You're a Cyclone. Right?
Go Cyclones, yeah.
Right. So, which, does that create any problems for you? You got Iowa, you got Iowa State, you got you got the Cyclones.
I'm a big Iowa fan, so anytime they're not playing, but I said, I'm an alum, so cut me a little slack. And I think they'd rather see you not try to have it both ways. But when Iowa's not playing Iowa State, I am cheering them on full-heartedly, and they're having a good year. So
they're still like ranked number 2 in the nation now or something, aren't they?
Yeah, they're doing really well. I've had a good year.
Yeah, it could be problems when you come visit us here in Lincoln for that Iowa-Nebraska game. That's another whole thing. All right, so, but that's also kind of a great segue into talking about how you went back and got your bachelor's degree. It's a great segue into workforce development, because I know this is something you've been very passionate about in making sure that Iowans are getting the education they need to be able to take all the great jobs. I know both Iowa and Nebraska have done very well through this pandemic, but why don't you talk to us a little bit as far as about the workforce development initiatives you've done to be able to get Iowans that education they need?
Yeah, you too. So I have been, as lieutenant governor, one of my number 1 priorities was the Governor's STEM Advisory Council. And we know that the sooner that we expose these young kids to opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and math, then the better their chances are at really having a great career and staying in the state of Iowa. So I chair the STEM Advisory Council, and we've really driven things like computer sciences, elementary, work-based learning, registered apprenticeship programs, certification, really bringing, and you've done all of this too, because it's just so critical. And it's so inspiring and exciting to see, especially kids that have kind of disengaged, when they have the opportunity to do the hands-on and find something they're passionate about, that re-engagement is just priceless. I mean, you can't pay for that. And it's had such an impact on kids and jobs and for kids who's the first person, they're the first one in their family to go and get a bachelor's degree or to get an associate's degree, or to enter an apprenticeship program and to have a career where they can make great money. So we've done a lot with that. I've been very involved in second chances. We are working a lot with our inmates and helping them get skills so that when they reenter back into society, that they have their driver's license, they have a skill. They're a lot of times.
Is this all stuff that you've done as governor to introduce those kind of things?
Yeah. Lieutenant Governor, I started the STEM and the work-based learning, registered apprenticeship. I've continued all that, but I've done, as governor, I've done some with the second chances. Our goal of having Iowans in the workforce have education or training beyond high school by the year 2025, when 70%. We're at about 65, 66 right now, so we're making good progress with that. So those are some of the areas that we're really focused on, and really just looking for ways to scale, because those kids that get into these businesses, they stay in those communities. It's the pipeline for the businesses. If they start in welding, but they want to take additional classes, a lot of times the company will pay for it. Then they have an engineer with tremendous background that's still in that community.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things I know that you're involved in, because you sit on the national board and you actually helped us get started with our program here in Nebraska, is the Jobs for America's Grads program. Yeah. So why don't you just talk to me a little bit about that too, because that's another one of the things that I know you've been a big advocate for.
Oh, it works. And what we really did is we call it IJAG here in the state of Iowa, but their completion rates are phenomenal. And some of these
kids just again, for our folks who don't know what it is, just give a little
Iowa
background.
Jobs for American Graduates. Yeah. And it works with disadvantaged kids. A lot of times they're homeless, or they have, just some really, really, really tough circumstances at home. And it helps provide them the support system that they need to be successful. And so we've invested in IJAG into high schools across the state. Now we're moving down into middle schools, and they really work with the kids to help get them through high school. They do community service. They help match them up with a job. We have, I think, 95% graduation rate. So we have the statistics are phenomenal with this program, in the fact that it does work. And then also, if they make the decision to go on to higher education, there's that built-in support system there as well.
Yeah. And then one of the other things I know that has been a highlight, or part of what your agenda has been as governor, is increasing funding for public education. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, record investments in K-12 education since, well, really it started when Governor Branstad and I came back, and we've increased funding year over year since then. Last year, we were able to expand charter schools, so we're really working hard to give parents a choice when it comes to their children's education. We've expanded homeschool, charter schools, open enrollment for kids. But on top of that, we've continued to make record investments in K-12 education as well. Kevin and I's daughter, our youngest daughter, is a second grade teacher. She's been teaching for 11 years. And so, we all know how important it is, that teacher in the classroom and the impact that it has on the success of our next generation. And so I have somebody in my ear all the time talking about what's going on in the classroom and how we can help make things just a little bit better. But it's been great. They love, we did a TLC where we did a leadership initiative with our teachers to be coaches and mentors in the classroom. And we've had some really great success with that as well. And our educators love the work-based learning and the registered apprenticeship program, because in STEM, we provide the professional development as well as the material that they need to do the classes. And they love seeing that engagement in the students as well.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about another thing that Iowa is really good at, ethanol. You are the number one ethanol producing state. Nebraska's number 2. I always say, hey, we want to catch up with Iowa, but given the gap right now, it's going to take a while for us to even come close. Talk a little bit about what you do to promote ethanol, and then some of the challenges we've had with this Biden administration with regard to ethanol.
Yeah, well, it has been a real challenge with the Biden administration. It's one of the things I appreciated about President Trump and his administration. I felt like we at least had somebody that would listen to us, especially when it came to the EPA and just some of the restrictions that they were placing on the industry overall. And it's just so frustrating. I think when you look at what's happening today, especially when they talk about lower fuel prices, where we've seen just the opposite. When they talk about their action on climate with electric vehicles, and they're just completely ignoring the ethanol and the biodiesel industry. And so, the capacity is there right now with ethanol and biodiesel to meet the very objectives that they're talking about. And so E15 year round, we were able to work really hard to get that done.
I know you were one of the lead voices on that.
Oh yeah, and we were able actually to go to Washington D.C., meet with the president in the White House. I was mostly with senators, but I weaseled my way in there, to talk about the importance of E15 year round and why we needed to get it done. And so I was really proud to be there and be a part of that conversation. And then just allowing it to be sold through the E10, the underground storage tanks and the dispensers, that would go a long way in really bolstering the demand for ethanol, as well as the labeling rule. That's something that we've been fighting forever and ever. But one of the things that we did last year too, and we're going to come back at it again this year, Governor, is, we just decided with what we continue to see coming out of each administration, the challenges that we have with the EPA and their just lack of recognizing what we do and what we have the capacity to do, is just we have to take charge of our own destiny. And so I put forward a pretty significant biofuels bill last year. We're going to go ahead and take a look at that, work with our fuel retailers, try to find some type of a compromise where we can ultimately drive demand and help this cleaner, cheaper burning fuel that's renewable. And so the other thing that we're working on too that's more long-term is our carbon sequestration task force that ultimately will add value to the process and as well as energy generation too.
Talk a little bit more about that carbon sequestration technology, because that's something that's relatively new from the standpoint of what people have been talking about, how to apply it to the ethanol industry.
Right. So what we're doing is looking at how we can get to net zero and how we can use carbon capture as a way of doing that, which would open the market for our ethanol in California and other places around the world, and so around the country, around the world. But what we're trying to do is lead on that. And so I put together a task force, a lot of expertise around the table. We're utilizing Iowa State University, much like we did with our nutrient reduction strategy, so that we have experts that can help us with definitions and standards and put some credibility behind what we're trying to do. And so I've given them 100 days. I forget which governor I stole that from, but if you keep that task force compact, they have to stay on task, they have to meet, and then they'll, I think second week in November, they'll be releasing their recommendations to us. But it's just a way, I think to lead on creating carbon value through ag stewardship as well as energy generation. So really looking at ways that we can capture carbon, store it, and then ultimately have a net zero fuel that can really help us drive the market on that as well and add value to what we do here in the Midwest.
Yeah, and I know that there's at least one of your citizens is, if it's not an Iowa-based company, at least you've got a good group of Iowa-based investors looking at building a pipeline to be able to take this carbon dioxide, because it turns out it's actually fairly easy to capture carbon dioxide off an ethanol
liquefy
plant.
Liquefy
it, and then pump it to North Dakota to be stored underground.
Yes, and they've already met with Summit Farms is taking a lead on this. There's another group that's already is also looking at it. Bruce is in that group is going north to North Dakota. The other is looking at kind of the southeast corner of the state and heading into Illinois. But there's a lot of opportunity up in North Dakota with their caverns, and they've had some really great conversations with Governor Burgum in regards to this. So we're hoping to kind of set that baseline, start to drive what that conversation looks like. Then we'll have to work, of course, with the federal government, but we're hoping to kind of lead on what those standards look like.
Yeah, and it's actually here in Nebraska, about half of our ethanol plants can actually have the over geological formations where they could store it on site.
So you do have, okay,
We've got about
in
half of our
Nebraska?
plants can do it in Nebraska where they could actually just store it on site versus using the pipeline. So,
Okay.
but there's a couple of different options. But one of the things that is really exciting about this is if you have a vehicle that's using E30, a 30% blend of ethanol, and with carbon sequestration, capturing that CO2 coming off of it, you've got a vehicle that has a carbon footprint.
Net zero.
Well, I was just going to say it's competitive with the electric vehicles.
Yes, right.
Right?
Yep.
And we've got we already have a distribution system to build, built already to be able to do that versus the charging stations you need for EVs and
the charging, the materials, the batteries that puts China in charge instead of our farmers and producers. It's silly, right here.
I got to tell you, that's one of my frustrations. Full disclosure, that's why I asked the question. At Nebraska being the number 2 ethanol state, but it just seems crazy to me that here we have a distribution system, we have a really promising technology, and we know that, one of the things I always talk about is ethanol. Save you money at the pump, going to clean up our air, good for our farmers and ranchers, right? So Midwest states like Iowa and Nebraska, this is a no-brainer.
Right.
And yet we don't get the support from the administration. We didn't get it under the Obama administration either for a clean fuel source that we can create right here in our own country versus,
Renewable.
It's renewable versus the president's push for electric vehicles, which for those rare earth elements, China's the dominant supplier of those. So we're making ourselves dependent upon, one of our chief adversaries here.
I know. Makes no sense at all. But, we were energy independent, and here we are seeing gas $1 higher than it was a year ago.
Yeah, gas prices are up over 50%, and we're no longer...
Absolutely no choice.
Yeah.
No sense.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense at all. All right. Well...
Share your frustration.
I know, that's why I asked about it. All right. So one of the things that, actually we just got done with the pandemic here, and Iowa came through that very well. Why don't you just talk to us a little bit about what did you see through the pandemic? How did you approach this? What did you do to help Iowans get through this really worldwide, emergency that we hadn't seen in a century?
Yeah. Well, first of all, our number one priority was the health and safety of Iowans, and to make sure that whatever we did, we didn't overwhelm the healthcare system. I think that was the same objective of most of us, at least in the Midwest. That's kind of where we came from. One of the unique aspects that we had, and Pete, you know that 10% of the nation's food supply comes from Iowa, and so we had an obligation to keep that food supply chain moving and to keep food on the table. And so I was really appreciative to work with this administration, first of all, to implement the Defense Production Act, which kept our processing plants open and kept the process moving. Another element that was just honestly a game changer for me, for the governor of the state, and just really in my ability to communicate with Iowans was when we were able to secure Test Iowa. Nobody could get with PPE was just scarce, and we were trying to figure out how to address that. We couldn't get testing supplies. It was like a recipe for a cake. So you'd have 3 of the ingredients, but that one key element nobody could get. And so we didn't have the test because of that. And the struggles that we were getting in actually processing the test once we were able to get it. And I know you utilized them as well, but that provided 540,000 tests. That was another opportunity for me to get in some of these businesses and these processing plants to test the employees to know who was positive, who wasn't, so they felt comfortable coming into work. But in addition to the test and the testing sites and the fact that we were able to provide them free of charge, just the robust data analytics that company also provided my team to be able to provide real-time data to Iowans, to be able to identify where some of the hot spots were. And then we could be more purposeful and strategic about getting our resources where we needed to go, letting the public know where some of our hot spots were at so that they could adjust accordingly. Another thing that we did that I know you did as well is we just prioritized the freedom and personal responsibility. We literally put our trust in Iowans to do the right thing. They did. Yep. And, we were all in this together. So when people say, thanks for getting me through COVID, I said, we got us through COVID. And that's how we kept our economy open and moving. And I think states that did that are coming out of this COVID in a really, really strong position. Wallet Hub named Iowa we had the fastest COVID recovery in the country. We were able to end in 2020 with COVID and a derecho, which
Right.
was like horrific. It was like a 140-mile tornado that went through most of my state. We actually didn't have to cut budgets or come back and do a special session, and we actually ended with $320 million surplus. And then this last fiscal year, we ended with a $1.24 billion and $800 million in cash reserves, which means we're over collecting, and we need to send that back to the taxpayers. And that's what we're going to be looking at next year. But I think, all of that has really helped, and we're outpacing our economic growth. And I know you've got a similar story, is outpacing the national average. Second quarter, our GDP grew at 7.7%. We ended last year with 11% growth. And it's because we kept things moving, kept people working, and it made a difference. It just made a difference.
Now, tax relief was something you guys were working on before the pandemic too, right?
Yeah. Yes. I signed into law the largest income tax cut in the history of our state. I removed the triggers last year, so it is going into effect. We repealed the no more inheritance tax. We also removed our mental health levy off of our property tax system. We're one of the few states that was still doing that. And that was about $100 million reduction to property taxes, which really our ag community has been working on this for a long time. And so we were able to move it off property taxes to the state, provide in a small growth factor, and provide sustainable funding for our mental health system as well. So, but I always say, I can tell you, every one of my colleagues, all they ever talk about is being more competitive and cutting taxes. And so I tell my legislature, if we're going to stay competitive, we have to keep cutting taxes, because I've got 26 other governors out there that are looking at doing the same thing. And so we want to make sure that we're in the game and we're competitive.
Yep. And so I think that's a great, one of the things I want you to talk about here is because you talked about, hey, we're cutting taxes, but you also we talked a little earlier about your record investment in public education, what you're doing for workforce development, but also talk about what you're doing on the area of mental health and behavioral health, because you've made big investments there, especially around children, right?
Yeah, I'm really, really, really proud of that, and especially coming out of the pandemic. So we did comprehensive reform with our adult mental health system. For 20 years, they'd been talking about, we didn't have a children's mental health system, and we needed to get it done. So I said, we're going to quit talking about it. We're going to do it. So I did a 100-day task force, made the recommendations. We put the legislation together and took it to the legislature, I guess 2 years ago now, at least a year ago. And we implemented the first children's mental health system in the state of Iowa. It got unanimous support, so I was really proud of that as well. We have an overarching board, and then we have the adult system, and then the children's. And hopefully we can get these kiddos the services that they need sooner rather than later, and just to make sure they have a great quality of life. Last piece was the funding. And so by doing what we did last year, we were able to secure long-term sustainable funding that made sure that no matter where you lived, you received the same services. They weren't disparate like they were before. Again, we got a lot of support across the board, all of the agencies, all of the groups, and we were able to get it done. So I was really proud of that. And then we've done a lot with our educators in providing funding for them, helping them identify early warning signs, training for our educators. And we also made our school site of service. And so we can have behavioral health specialists come in either through telehealth or on site and provide some one-on-one with the kids and their families, and then within the HIPAA restrictions. So they're able to do that the way that they need to do that. But it's also been a win-win for the teachers, because they're a resource for the teachers too if they've got a question about maybe one of their students and how they can help them through some really tough times.
So it sounds like a lot, because you've talked about a lot of different things, record tax cuts, the record investment in education, the mental health, the workforce, all that. It sounds like that's a lot of being able to manage your budget, keeping that in order, but also developing the relationships to be able to put these programs in place so that you can successfully execute them. And as like one of the things you just said, make it a win-win. Is that accurate?
No, that's accurate. And just really by, a lot of buy-in, whether it's been workforce or mental health or broadband. We did a significant broadband appropriation last year.
Right.
That was bipartisan support. So they haven't voted on my tax cuts yet. So I'm still working on that. But, it's amazing that if you do just really take a look at foundational priorities and how it, just improves the overall stability of your state and Iowans, you can work together and get a lot of good things done. And we've been able to do that. And so it's kind of nice when people talk about how divisive, politics are today. And it is. I mean, I'm not trying to sugarcoat that, but I am able a lot of times to say, yes, it is. And it's especially so at the national level, but it's different in the states. And truly, if you look at what we've done, I think I've got some great examples of how we've been able to find common ground and get some really important things done on behalf of Iowans.
So is that really kind of the secret of your success, is really trying to build those bridges and get that buy-in and do a lot of that groundwork to be able to bring people together?
Yep. Just on the front end, just talking, conversations, bringing them into the fold early. I travel the state a lot, so I'll meet with legislators in their home territory, invite them to the roundtables that I do or the business stops that I do. And so we can just kind of together talk about the things that we're working on to help business people, different in all areas of the state. So that's been, I think, helpful too.
Well, it's interesting, and this is where I want you to kind of draw a contrast here between kind of your style and what I've heard from you, because you talked a lot of stories, right, about the woman you sat next to at graduation that was a single mom who just got her degree, or your daughter's a school teacher telling you about what you can improve on in education and how you travel the state, talk to people. Contrast that with this new administration, whether it's been on the pandemic response or anything else, and about kind of how do you feel that the last administration dealt with governors versus this new administration, and kind of what's been the interaction?
Well, I miss it because I always felt like we had a seat at the table. How many times were the two of us in the White House around a table talking about issues that impact the people of our states, to be able to have that conversation, that dialogue? And it wasn't just Republicans around the table. Oftentimes it was, but it was governors that were around the table talking about what was going on in their states. And I just appreciate that so much. And it's just such the opposite right now. There's just a complete disregard almost for states and for governors and for their autonomy in, dealing with what they need to be dealing with at the state level. Just the policies that are coming out of the White House right now are having a direct impact, whether it's tax and spend and inflation that we're facing, the workforce crisis, the mandates that are only exacerbating that, the workforce, the supply chain, all of that impacts our states. Open border, we had closed border. We were able to talk about policies that worked there, and the drop in some of the drugs that were coming into our states, and what we're seeing right now. We continue to see increased meth, and especially meth in the state of Iowa, but fentanyl is also becoming more and more of a problem. There's always guns associated with those. So it's just completely different. We were talking tax cuts and an economy that was booming, lowest unemployment ever. I was on the President's Workforce Policy Board. I was so excited working with Ivanka and Wilbur Ross to see the really innovative things that we were putting in place just to help people succeed. Increase wages for blue-collar workers. I mean, the list goes on. And I've never seen anything do such a complete reverse in such a short time frame ever. And it's just a constant challenge. It's just a constant, when you feel like things are going good in your state, it's a constant battle with what's coming out of Washington, D.C.
So why do you think it's so important that executives such as yourself listen to people who are dealing with these, and contrasting that with what the apparent lack of interest the Biden administration has in talking to us as governors about what we see in our states? I mean, why is it so important that executives listen to people?
Well, because that's how I develop my policy. I mean, is that what you're asking me?
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm out in the state listening, oftentimes that's the direction that I need in putting together my program for next year. When I start to hear at several different places issues that they're having, then we dig in deeper and we look for ways that we can start to solve that problem. You need to get out in the state, like you need to probably go to the border and talk to the ranchers and the Border Patrol and the law enforcement like we did, and hear firsthand what's actually taking place, the gotaways, what it means when they step foot on our soil, and the chances of them ever going back being slim to none. You can't correct or fix something that you don't know about, or you're not willing to sit down and listen and ask questions and figure out together maybe what some of those solutions look like going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So one of the things that you and I both were down at the southern border talking to those officials who are dealing right now with what's going on at the border, and in fact, as one official down there, as one of the generals in the Texas National Guard described it, it's not an illegal immigration problem, it's a mass migration problem. And just hearing the challenges they have there around that. And one of the things I thought was interesting is that the president has never been to the southern border ever we found out he had never in any of his career been down to the southern border. And yet we were there, and part of what we talked about was our plan to be able to how to address it. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because the president's press secretary, Jen Psaki, was saying, well, we're tired of speeches from these Republican governors. So we actually gave them a plan. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about that, that plan that we were down on the southern border talking about?
Yeah, well, we were hoping to get together with him. 26 other governors, 26 total, sent a joint letter to the Biden administration, the president, and asked if we could sit down and talk about how we can stop the self-inflicted humanitarian and security crisis at the border. No response, no acknowledgement. So 10 of us went down to the border to, first of all, just see firsthand, get an update from the Border Patrol, the state law enforcement, and then, of course, Governor Abbott. And in doing that, we put together a 10-point plan that the Biden administration could implement tomorrow. It doesn't take an act of Congress. It's something that he could do immediately. Remain in Mexico, resume deportation of all of the criminals, re-enter agreements with our Northern Triangle partners in Mexico. One of the things that I talked about when I was down there is they're releasing illegal immigrants into the country, and they're also transporting them into our states in the middle of the night. We had 19 unaccompanied young minor girls that were under the cover of night flown into the Des Moines airport. From there, they were loaded on 3 charter buses and dispersed into the country. We asked the administration. They denied having anything to do with it for over a month. And finally, after a month, as we kept investigating, they admitted that it was them that had brought the 19 unaccompanied minor girls into the state of Iowa. That was in April. Tennessee had experienced the same thing. So making sure that governors know when migrants and unaccompanied children are being brought into our states, we're responsible for them. Our number one priority is to protect the health and safety of our citizens. Hard to do that when you don't know what's going on. And just be more consistent with the messaging that we have, that we don't have open borders, that there is a process. Remain in Mexico was another piece of that. Continue the Title 42 public health restrictions was another component of the 10-point plan. Main thing is 10 points, 10 policies that he could put in place tomorrow. Doesn't take an act of Congress that would shut it off. And the president of the Border Patrol, who's worked for them for 25 years, said no matter how much infrastructure and finish building the wall, of course, that was one of them too, that until they change the policy, nothing's going to change. They have to change the policy to put a stop to what we're seeing, the mass migration taking place.
Yeah, and again, it gets back to just having that experience down there helps you understand that. And of course, you've got your own experience in the state. And, when you told that story, which as you mentioned was a very similar story to what Governor Bill Lee in Tennessee told, it just boggles the mind that the federal government would even deny that this was them, because it looks like a sex trafficking operation, right?
Oh, right. That's why I said, well, then we're going to continue to use my own resources, because if you're not involved, it looks like human trafficking, sex trafficking. And so, we talked to ICE, we talked to DHS, we talked to Homeland. No. A solid month. We got Senator Grassley involved. We asked him to ask for hearings. I sent a joint letter with Governor Lee. And finally, about a month later, the Office of Refugee Resettlement and Homeland finally admitted that they were the responsible for flying the private plane into the Des Moines airport in the middle of the night. And just layer after layer, we were able to find somebody down in Florida that they were contracting with, and then there was another layer after that. So I can't even imagine the amount of money that is going in to, transporting illegals and then unaccompanied children all across the state. And then you hear things like they've lost contact of 1 in 3. Well, where are they? And did they vet the people they dropped them off with? I mean, there's so many questions that are going unanswered, and they just don't care. They just don't care, or they would be down there and they would be implementing some of these things.
Yeah. And so when they finally admitted that was them, did they give you any reason? Like they say, oh, sorry, we just weren't talking to them. We didn't know. They didn't give you. Yeah.
No, but what they say is if they get, if they make it to the United States, they have an obligation to do something with them. Well, so stop them.
Yeah.
Stop them on the other side of the border. I mean, it is like they have the welcome mat out right now. And the numbers are horrific, and they're continuing to increase.
Yeah,
what did they decide? 1.8 million now?
Well, I was going to say that's how many contacts. Yeah, I was going to say, talking to Brandon Judd, who is the president of the National Border Patrol Council, who I think you were referencing earlier. He said that it was between 400,000 and 600,000 people had been released into this country just this year, and the year's not even over, right? I mean, this was about a month ago or so when we were down there.
Yeah, and the numbers continue to go up. I mean, it is a national security issue.
Yeah, it's a humanitarian crisis, and it's a national security issue. And then, of course, you're seeing the impact in your state, as we are in ours, with regard to the drug trafficking that you were mentioning before.
And the other thing is, I mean, it's just not sustainable. We can't, as a country, sustain these numbers. There's no way. They're utilizing social services. I know if they're paroling, I guess there's some way that potentially they can get a workforce visa at some point, but that's not going to happen. They have a recommendation, or we hope you show up, in a year or two. Well, the border, Brandon, he said they don't. The reality is they don't come back, and then they are in the shadows forever. And it just exasperates, again, the problems that we're all facing. Drugs, guns, trafficking. Every state is seeing an increase. And the purity of the drugs that are coming across is a real problem also.
Yeah, we've seen that. One of the things we talked about in that 10-point plan was clearing the backlog of people, because to your point, when they're put into custody and given a court date, it's 2 years down the road.
Right.
And that's where they disappear. And as Brandon was saying, very few of them come back for that court date 2 years down the road when they finally get it.
Right.
So it creates problems there. And one of the things we've seen here in Nebraska is unscrupulous employers who then exploit the illegal immigrants that come here, skimming their paychecks, knowing that they can't go to the police, that sort of thing. So there's so many different levels of how these
trafficking,
folks,
right?
Yeah, labor trafficking. There's also could be sex trafficking. Yeah.
Yep.
So that was the other thing too. We found out is just how little regard for human life the coyotes who transport people across the border, these smugglers, actually have. These smugglers have so little regard for human life and will do things to purposely put them in danger so that they can get away, or just abandon them in the desert in the first place, which we heard stories about
Pete,
as well.
I think one of the figures I heard was that the cartel was making over $400 million a month, just moving bodies across the border. So, I mean, they're the ones that are driving policy down there. It's the cartel, and this administration has to be the dream team for what they're doing and how they're exploiting these people. And to see those young kids, on that desert by themselves, it's horrific. It's horrific.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've hit a lot of different topics, so we're kind of coming toward the end here of our time together. But is there anything else that we didn't hit upon that you would like to hit upon? Something that we missed as far as your administration, or anything about the current Biden administration and how they relate to states, or anything like that you want to hit upon as well?
No, just a couple other things that we're working on that we're going to be dropping in the next couple weeks. And again, we're trying to be very careful on how we're using the ARPA, which is the federal dollars that are coming into the state. It really is unconscionable, the amount of dollars that are being spent by this White House. I mean, right now, and it's probably over that. In Iowa, I think we totaled up all the dollars that had come in, and it was over $9 billion, and our general fund budget is $8 billion. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I mean, at some point, the payday comes due, and it's just unconscionable, and I don't see them slowing down on any of that. But So we've tried to be purposeful in dealing with infrastructure, but we've made a significant investment from the state, and then with ARPA in housing and childcare. Childcare continues to be a real challenge for getting our people back to work, and so we'll be kind of releasing next week, I think, some of the areas where we're going to hopefully address some of our childcare issues. So that's something we're looking at as well.
All right. So again, focus on people.
People, yep.
Yep. All right. Great. All right. So if somebody does want to follow along with you, Kim, follow all the great policy things that you've got put in place or the things you're going to be working on, how would somebody do that? So
reynoldsgreg.com. They can follow us on Facebook, me, or my Twitter handle, which I stay off of Twitter, but it's at Iowa IA Governor. It's like when my 3 daughters say, I said, yeah, I don't look at social media, and all of them almost jumped down my throat and said, don't do that, Mom. Don't look. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's just soul sucking.
Anyway,
don't read the
Twitter
comments. Don't read the comments. Yeah.
At Iowa.governor. Right.
Yeah. Very good. All right, great. Well, first of all, Kim, I just want to say, as a fellow governor, I so appreciate the great working relationship that we have. One of the things throughout this pandemic and on other issues as well is we share a lot of, pick up the phone, call each other, ask each other questions. Hey, what are you seeing? I'm doing this. What are you doing? Getting advice back and forth. So I really appreciated that relationship. Obviously, always love seeing you at the Iowa games. We do Heroes of the Heartland and get to recognize those great Iowans and Nebraskans who are doing so much for the community. And it really is one of the things that I think has been a huge benefit to me is the fact that we can pick up the phone and call our fellow governors and ask about what's going on and have a good line of communication back and forth so that we can be sharing those best practices. And I know that we borrow each other's best ideas, sometimes with credit, sometimes without. Like that. During the pandemic, I stole Doug Burgum and Doug Ducey's 21 days to stay home, stay healthy, stay connected.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was a great tagline. I totally didn't give him credit. So
we do sometimes, right?
Yeah, sometimes we do. So it's great having such a great neighbor to the east of our state. So we really appreciate all that you and your team do. And of course, we love the opportunity to be right next door to the great state of Iowa. And for all of our viewers and listeners, you can certainly follow us on Facebook. You can or at Gov Ricketts on Twitter. We're on Instagram. Pete at pete.ricketts@nebraska.gov. If you want to email us, please go on social media, give us 5 stars so that we can get big ratings. I'm totally unapologetically self-promoting our podcast when we do that sort of thing. So please go in and if you like the podcast, give us a good rating. Well, Kim, it is great having such a great neighbor to the east of us. Really appreciate the great working relationship. Appreciate all that you do for the great state of Iowa. Thank you so much and have a great day. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for being such a great governor. Thanks for being such a great colleague and a great friend. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Paid for by Pete Ricketts for Governor, 1610 N Street, Suite 100, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68508.